Hi, Acadiana. Meteorologist Dave Baker here on a Thursday. This is August 21st. Welcome to Let's Talk Tropics. We get a lowdown on all of the tropical weather that's out there. We still have Hurricane Erin. We've got a couple of disturbances now. Hopefully that I've got all my graphics updated because just in the last 10 minutes or so, 99L, which is out on the eastern part of the Atlantic, has now been joined by 90L as we're starting over those 90s here as we've gone through them all. But that's the disturbance is a little bit closer to the Leeward Islands and has a pretty good chance for some development here over the next couple of days. I got one other entry that's in the central part of the Atlantic, a very minor low pressure area. And then we've got a number of tropical waves that are going to come off the African coast, and even a couple of models that are suggesting maybe one of these waves that kind of crosses the Atlantic Ocean. It might become something for a short period of time and then kind of wash out, but it might have a little resurgence if it can make its way into the Caribbean. So we'll kind of go over all that here just a little bit. Right now, there's nothing to worry about as far as the Gulf waters are concerned. We've got a lot of cloud cover, kind of hazy out there right now, 85 degrees. Our dew point is at 73, so it does feel like 92 out there, humidity 68%, with a breeze out of the north-northwest. And as far as our area roadways, everything looks pretty dry out there across the Acadiana region. But we do have a considerable amount of cloud cover and some haze out there this afternoon. So far, that has prevented some of the lift with the daytime heating, but I do expect some showers, some thunderstorms to start to fire up there over parts of central Mississippi, central Louisiana, and kind of working back into eastern portions of Texas. You got the usual activity that's out in the offshore waters, but we do have more of a trough that's kind of moving across the middle part of the country, kind of about right in there or so. And that's going to be more of a focal point for some showers and thunderstorms here over the next couple of days. That trough is going to work its way all the way down to the coast as we head into the weekend. And that will hopefully bring us some slightly drier air in the forecast for Saturday and especially there on Sunday. So you can kind of see the setup a little bit more here on the big picture. Of course, you got Erin that's out here off the east coast. And then you've got a bit of a trough that's right about in here. Erin's going to help to pull that down a little bit farther and have it sag right along the coast or somewhere offshore. Got another frontal boundary and another trough that's going to dig across the eastern half of the country. And might even actually, believe this or not, send another front sometime next week. At this point, I'm not ringing the gumbo pot just yet, but anytime we can get some lower humidity during the month of August, that's always a welcome sign. But fall, not quite in the picture yet, but you're starting to see some subtle changes, especially north of the Canadian border, that would indicate that the seasons will be changing soon. As far as the Gulf waters, we're in really good shape there. We always like to see the Gulf like this, especially here in the latter part of August. We've just got flare-ups, some thunderstorms there right along the Texas coast. And as that trough or that front kind of works its way down to the coast, we'll watch it over the weekend for some possibilities of development because sometimes that can happen. That is not in the forecast models, though, but occasionally, you can get something to linger over the northern Gulf waters. You got very warm water out there. You got high heat content. If you end up with some low wind shear, sometimes you can get a little action there in the northern part of the Gulf. Again, that is not in the models right now, but it's something that we always look for during hurricane season. And if you're going to do some boating or if you're doing some work in the offshore waters, not a bad day out there. The winds are light and the seas are fairly low as well. We've got light breezes out of the west and northwest, and those seas running about 1 to 2 feet. Really pretty day over in Panama City Beach once again. A few more clouds as you work your way over toward Orange Beach. A little rain off there in the distance. Looks like you got some haze, maybe a little shower activity out in the offshore water south of Dauphin Island, and then farther off toward the west, just some fair weather clouds there off toward the southeast, or rather southwest of Galveston, where we got some showers that'll start to build there a little later on in the afternoon. So again, we've got a number of different players that are out there, and the good news on this map is there's nothing heading toward the Gulf waters and really nothing going toward the Caribbean either. So we're going to focus on Erin in just a little bit, but also that red shaded region with the X that's just east of the Leeward Islands. That is now the newest disturbance, 90L, and then the orange X that you're seeing out in the middle part of the Atlantic, southwest of the Cape Verde Islands, that is 99L. That was the one that was looking like it was going to have a little better chance for development earlier on, but now this other wave that's near the Leeward Islands looks like to be a bigger player, and unfortunately that is going to be possibly affecting Bermuda. Bermuda breathing a sigh of relief And a lot of folks along the northern Caribbean, Bahamas, and the East Coast breathing a sigh of relief that this major Hurricane Erin, the core of the worst winds, stayed offshore. I know there were some indirect impacts along the East Coast and parts of Bermuda and the Bahamas, but the bulk of that core of the system stayed over water. So we really didn't have the most intense winds bothering anybody. So that is great news. Hurricane Erin, though, is now starting to make its turn more toward the northeast, and it has weakened a little bit since the last advisory, dropping back down to 100-mile-per-hour winds, so it's still a solid Category 2 hurricane. We think it's going to remain a hurricane probably through the rest of the week, and then probably a non-tropical low that would be hurricane force as we get into the latter part of the weekend, and eventually it will weaken and become a non-tropical low, or pretty vigorous low, though, even as it moves over toward Iceland and the British Isles. And all of the computer models are pretty much on target. No big changes in the forecast that we've seen over the past few days. And as far as the intensity models for Hurricane Erin, we are expecting a downward trend here, at least a couple of days from now. Most of the models have a significant downward spiral there on those winds, especially as you get past 3 days. So outside of Erin, the Caribbean, Western Caribbean and Central America, southern part of the Gulf, Bay of Campeche, really not a lot going on. We've got some thunderstorms and quite a bit of rain down in Costa Rica and down toward Panama as well. That's kind of the southern end of a tropical wave that's working its way westward out of the Caribbean. The remainder of the Caribbean is looking very quiet. Again, this is exactly what we want to see this time of the year, is no tropical systems moving through the Caribbean, because there's a lot of heat content, very warm waters. There's just a lot of potential over the Caribbean. So if we can steer all these tropical waves away from there, not only does it prevent better chances for something to develop, but anything that's in the Caribbean, we start to get a lot more nervous here along the northern Gulf Coast. So we'll focus in on 90L. This is that tropical wave that we've been watching for a couple of days, but it did get its designation as an official tropical wave. And when I tell you, this probably came down in the last 30 minutes or so. So I was scrambling trying to get these graphics together. So like I said, hopefully I got them right. The intensity guidance for this does have some steady increase in intensity, and at least the models that are running so far after maybe 3 or 4 days could take it up into the hurricane range. So again, Bermuda is going to have to really watch out for that. And as far as my other graphic, let me see if I've lost it here. If I could find some of the other graphics that I have here when it comes to the intensity of this particular, or rather some track. There we go. There's the track, at least on some of the ensemble models that we have from the American model. Many of them do go tropical storm and even hurricane. Unfortunately, it does appear that Bermuda could possibly be in the crosshairs of this. So over the next couple of days, we will watch that. I don't think we're going to see a lot of development here today or even tomorrow, but as we get into the weekend, I think it's going to have a little better chance for development as it starts to slide to the north. Again, good news is 90L is not going to be a threat to the Gulf. So let's focus on 99L, which is the one that's out in the middle part of the Atlantic. It looks pretty threatening out there, and you can see where it is with all the rest of the stuff that's out there. You got Erin, you got a tropical wave that's now 90L, and then that low pressure area in the North Atlantic, really not too interested in that one. It could quickly become a strong low pressure area, maybe depression for a short window. But 99L has a chance here in the next couple of days, and then it probably is going to run into some more of a hostile environment for development as we go into the weekend. You got another wave that's come off the African coast, and they're just lining up now all the way across the central continent of Africa. So we're going to see a number of tropical waves coming off, but I will say that some of the forecasts looking at the next couple of weeks showing, again, more hostile conditions for tropical development out in the eastern part of the Atlantic for the next couple of weeks. And I was also reading the Colorado State University. They do an update every 2 weeks now. And even they were talking about there's just a lot of stuff going on in the atmosphere that might actually lower the amount of activity here in the next couple of weeks. But it is the peak of hurricane season, so it's pretty likely something, at least one thing, is going to develop. So 99L is working its way off toward the west. Again, most of our computer models do take it on a westward trend. I will say, compared to the last couple of days, it does appear that the models are holding on to this a little bit longer. If you were here yesterday or if you were here on Tuesday, Tuesday, a lot of these models kind of just stopped after 72 hours or maybe 96 hours. So they really weren't buying into anything significant, with maybe it becoming a tropical depression for a short period of time and then working westward and eventually kind of weakening. And most of the models do keep this subtropical depression over the next 5 days. There's a handful of models that go up tropical storm. You got a couple of them that reach category 1 in that, but they're the kind of the outliers. So most of the time when you're looking at intensity models like this, you want to kind of stay with the bulk of where the final solutions are. So at this point, I don't think we're going to see a lot out of 99L. It could briefly become a tropical depression, maybe a tropical storm, but then as it heads a little closer to the Windward Islands, I think it's going to open back up as a wave, but then the remnants of that could move over into the Caribbean, and that's what we're going to talk about in just a little while, about the possibility of some future action that might be a little bit more in the western part of the Caribbean. But I will say the ensemble models out of the Euro that really wasn't buying into this storm at all has a little bit more solutions compared to what we saw yesterday. And the GFS was pretty robust on this one a couple of days ago, and it's backed off a little bit, but you can see that the consensus of the ensemble models, and again, the black line is kind of the final solution of the GFS, and then all of the other squiggly lines that you're seeing there are the same model run over and over and over again, with just a little bit of a difference in the numbers going into the calculations to kind of give you that what if. So all of the colored lines that you're seeing on there is more of the what if, what could possibly happen. So a lot of those lines are heading their way over toward the Caribbean, which does make it a little more nerve-wracking, because we never want to see anything pushing into the Caribbean Sea, especially with some of the high heat content that we have out there right now. So let's look at the Euro, and this is the deterministic, so this only gives us one solution. It's a lot different than the ensemble that can throw, and we're going to look at the other ensembles, but it throws a bunch of those, what could possibly happen rather than what they think will happen. But the Euro model shows Erin making that curve and working its way off toward the east. And if you notice here, there's really not a whole lot associated with 90L, which is that little wave that's right about in here. The Euro model really isn't picking up on that, but again, this is a model from very early this morning. We're going to get a new run that will have more of the information on 90L coming up later on. But you also notice the low that's there in the central Atlantic that's kind of southwest of the Cape Verde Islands, got a 1012, 1013, you see it there. That is going to move westward. And remember how I said that it might become a tropical depression briefly and then kind of fall apart as a tropical wave by the weekend? So this is looking at Sunday, and we're seeing a little bit more moisture from that tropical wave kind of working its way here in the central part of the Caribbean, and still on more of a westward track. But there's a lot of heat content that's out here in the western part of the Caribbean, and if the wind shear drops off, there's a possibility we could see something regenerating. But at this point, the Euro really doesn't show a lot of that as we go out here about 5 or 6 days. We're now getting into, that's 10 days out. And you can see going into the latter part of August and going into the early part of September, really, there's nothing out there according to the Euro. So that is good news. Let's roll it back here a little bit and we'll check out the GFS. And I know the GFS, if you've been on social media, you know that this has been throwing out some kind of weird solutions. But you see 90, well, you can see Erin first of all off the Carolina coast. And then just to orient you, we've got 90L, which is our newest disturbance here, and then you got 99L that's out here in the middle part of the Atlantic. So we'll just go ahead and advance this slowly. And you see 90L kind of gets a little bit of a low pressure area there north of Puerto Rico. And again, that heads right toward Bermuda. And as it deepens there, there's a good possibility that's going to be a tropical storm or possibly a hurricane. Let me back it up just a little bit so we can focus on the other low that's out, which is 99L out here in the middle part of the Atlantic. And you notice that even the GFS has it kind of fall apart as a wave and then move into portions of the Caribbean. But as 90L, the initial one, has now moved into the northern part of the Atlantic right there, which is on Thursday of next week, so about a week from now. There might be a little bit of a trough or a tropical wave still left over from what is now 99L over here, perhaps moving into portions of the Caribbean. As I advance it a little bit farther in time, as we go out the full 10 days here, you see that it doesn't develop a whole lot. Maybe the moisture kind of works its way over the Yucatan and kind of pulls into the Bay of Campeche and maybe continuing on more of a westward track. You also see there's that other little low that's right there off the Carolina coast. That might actually be a low developing off a front. Remember I kind of told you about that trough that's Erin's going to kind of pull a trough, and then there's another front that's coming across the country. That actually might develop along that front. So sometimes you can get some homegrown systems a little closer to the coast as well. Real quick, we'll go through the Canadian, and again, here we go for today. You see the low associated with Erin, and then as far as what we're talking about when it comes to 90L, doesn't really show up on here yet, and there's the 99L a little bit farther over toward the east. So we'll advance this. Again, the Canadian model only goes out 10 days, so again, you see 90L kind of spin up there and head over toward Bermuda, and then maybe a little bit of a low there crossing the Windward Islands and moving into the Caribbean. But over time, I don't really see anything trying to develop over the western part of the Caribbean, going out 10 days, but kind of like what the GFS was talking about, maybe another low coming off the Carolina coast due to a frontal boundary that's going to be there at that particular time, 10 days from now. Icon model, we'll roll it on back again, and Icon again loves to develop just about everything that's out there, but it doesn't seem very robust on 90L, and it doesn't seem very robust on 99L either. Maybe a little bit of a low coming close to Bermuda, and a tropical wave perhaps making its way into the southern part of the Caribbean, but the Icon model just really isn't showing anything that could possibly develop there. So let's hope that trend continues, because the last thing I want to see is a tropical wave making its way into the Caribbean, anywhere in the Caribbean at this point. And part of the reason is those water temperatures are so incredibly hot, especially there around Jamaica, south of Cuba, and in the central and eastern part of the Gulf, even all the way up to the Louisiana Gulf Coast. Some of those water temperatures are above 31 degrees Celsius. So you're starting to push 88, 89 degrees on that water. And then that hot water goes very deep under the surface of the ocean. So if a tropical system starts to work in that area, it can continue to churn up that warm water below the surface. We call that the tropical cyclone heat potential. And when there's a lot of heat content, like what you're seeing in the southern Gulf, much of the western Caribbean, and now starting to spread there east of Puerto Rico, those are the prime areas. If you get any kind of a tropical wave or even a weak tropical system to move over this area and tap into that heat potential, if you've got the right atmospheric conditions, such as low wind shear and a lot of moisture, you can see a tropical wave turn into a hurricane in nothing flat. Same thing goes if you've got a weak tropical storm, it can turn into a major hurricane in a matter of 24 hours. When you have the scenario like this over the western part of the Caribbean and the southern part of the Gulf waters as well. Now, the Eurotropical Formation forecast, I'm actually just taking you out another week. And remember how I was saying that the CSU folks, the Colorado State folks, were talking about maybe a little bit more of a lull in activity coming up over the next couple of weeks. But they also, in that report, remind you that we are near the peak of the hurricane season, so something developing anywhere in the Atlantic Basin this time of the year is a relatively good chance. But the tropical formation forecast for this coming Monday, so what is that, the 25th, following through the Monday of Labor Day, you can see that some of that activity drops off. And the great news is there's nothing over the Gulf or really the Western Caribbean. Maybe a little flare up there along the Venezuelan and Colombian coastline, and perhaps a few tropical waves coming in off of the African coast. And it does match up pretty well with the Global Tropics Hazard Outlook that was issued on Tuesday from the 27th through the day after Labor Day. You're looking at maybe some activity over the eastern Atlantic that spreads a little bit more for that third week, which is September 3rd through the 9th. A large part of the Atlantic and even parts of the Caribbean and the Bay of Campeche lighting up a little bit. So again, at this time of the year, this is where we normally see the bulk of our activity, and September 10th is generally associated as the peak of the hurricane season. So August, we have a lot of areas that we have tropical development or tropical systems that pass by. Now, this is the number of systems, the named storms that have passed through these areas over the past 100 years. And where it's shaded red, that's more than 70. So that's what, at least 2 for the month of August on average every year. But look at September. Even more real estate opens, and even parts of the Gulf start to open up. Not only do you have these waves that come over Africa, but like in the beginning of the season, that Central American gyre starts to spin around there over Central America. And sometimes you can get some development maybe near Panama, Nicaragua, over toward Costa Rica. And then that kind of turns its way off toward the northwest over toward the Gulf. So you start to get more into that Central American gyre setup again as you start to end the hurricane season. We see that a lot during May, June, and July, and then it kind of backs off in August and most of September. But as you start working your way into September, October, that Central American gyre sometimes can get a little more busy, and then you got local storms that are starting to affect us, and that, of course, is always a problem. So, again, a lot more real estate will open up during the month of September, and that's why I keep telling you, make sure you're prepared for anything that could come in the next several weeks. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. I certainly enjoy hanging out with y'all every afternoon. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on those notifications. Remember, you can hear my forecasts on Big 102.1, Planet Radio 106.7, and Freedom 95.1. And also in between, check my social media pages, both on Facebook and X. And thanks to all of the 3,700 plus subscribers to Acadiana Weather Today right here on YouTube. Hope to see you for Acadiana Weather Today tomorrow morning at 7 and again at noon for Let's Talk Tropics. Have a great day.